Taiwan braces for a typhoon, but could it be the first to make landfall this year? No drone zone. The day after shooting down a Chinese drone over its territory, Taiwan makes it clear further incursions won't be tolerated. Taiwan hikes the minimum wage by 4%, but will it do much to combat the country's low-wage problem? And police bust a trafficking ring targeting some of Taiwan's most vulnerable people. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Typhoon Hinnamnor is barreling across the East China Sea and could make landfall in Taiwan. It's triggered a sea warning and will bring heavy rain and winds to many parts of the country. Dozens of flights and ferry services have also been cancelled. And as Bing Wang reports, many here are preparing for the change in weather after the summer's heat wave.
It's papaya season, and these farmers in western Taiwan are scrambling to fortify the harvest. That's because Typhoon Hinnamnor is nearing Taiwan. The typhoon is not expected to make landfall, but a sea warning has been issued that could bring heavy rains and strong winds to many parts of the country.
它的暴风半径则是有略微的扩大，从原本的220公里扩大到250公里。那预计台风在明后2天，大致上就是位在台湾的东南方海面，到后天会逐渐往北上，通过台湾东方的海面。
While some farmers are struggling to save their harvests, it's a welcome sign for the northeastern port city of Keelung. The city has been facing a drought since early August. The mayor had to bring in water tankers and ask residents to conserve water. It's been a long and hot summer with heat waves and droughts felt across the world, and the soaring temperatures have certainly been felt here in Taiwan. In fact, it's been the 5th hottest summer on record. It's expected the rain will bring some relief, along with helping parts of the country suffering from water shortages.
这暑假很热，反而下雨比较凉快。台风快来，所以要赶快把要忙的事情赶快忙完。对，因为晚一点风雨可能会更大。
今年有特别热，但是我觉得变凉的时间也可能也快一点。
Taiwan's typhoon season has historically been from July to September, but for the last 3 years, the first typhoon didn't hit until September, and this year is no different. The Ministry of Science and Technology says that global warming is a likely cause of this extreme weather and could mean fewer typhoons in the future. James Rayner and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's premier says the army had no choice but to shoot down a Chinese drone over the outlying islands of Jinmen. As Louise Watt reports, Taiwan's military says it's dealing with a rising threat from Chinese drones, and they are spending $140 million on a homegrown defense system.
After weeks of Chinese drones appearing over Taiwan's outlying islands, Taiwan is signaling it's fighting back against the encroaching presence. On Thursday, Taiwan shot down a Chinese civilian drone that flew near a military outpost in Kinmen County. The Taiwan-controlled islands are just a few kilometers from the Chinese mainland. The drone was spotted over Kinmen's Lion Islet, which sits across from Xiamen City in southeast China. Troops stationed on the islet fired flares and live rounds in an attempt to repel it.
国军这一次对该无人机警示，要求离去，人置之不理，只好做这样子的防卫射击处理。这是一再忍耐，一再警告之后最适当的做法，相信国人同胞跟世界各民主国家看起来都是认为妥当的应处。
These intrusions are seen as part of China's grey zone tactics, a strategy to wear Taiwan down without starting a war.
中国有无人机飞到我国境内，还拍影片回去做大内宣。我们已经一再警告， 一再要求不要亲门打吼，国人同胞也同感愤慨。
Beijing claims Taiwan as part of its territory, and its foreign ministry says Chinese drones flying to Kinmen should not be a surprise. Chinese state media have said they exposed Taiwan's weak defences. Now, Taiwanese analysts say new methods are needed to counter drone incursions.
用这个干扰枪为主，就是进行电子干扰，破它，让它迫降。那第二个，未来可能也可以考虑，就是导入这捕捉用的无人机。
Tensions between China and Taiwan have shot up since the visit by US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in early August. Despite Beijing's objections, she became the highest US official to set foot in Taipei in a quarter century. China launched large-scale military exercises around Taiwan to express anger over Pelosi's trip. But even now, Taiwan is scrambling daily to drive away Chinese planes and ships that are venturing closer to Taiwan's territory more frequently than before. Neither side has confirmed exactly where the drones that are menacing Taiwan are coming from. But the Defense Ministry is investing heavily in a homegrown drone defense system that will be set up by next year. Esnaya Zhou and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's legislature has kicked off its latest session after the summer recess. The budget is expected to be the biggest item on the agenda. Last week, Taiwan's cabinet announced a 13.9% increase in the defense budget. Also up for discussion is an amendment to the act governing police use of firearms. It follows the murder of 2 police officers in the southern city of Tainan last month. The government has said it will lower the liability on officers who discharged their weapons while on duty. Politicians across party lines are backing lowering Taiwan's voting age to 18. When voters go to the polls for November's local elections, they will also be voting on a constitutional amendment that will see the voting age brought in line with the age of majority. But for the change to pass, 50% of Taiwan's population must vote yes. With polls indicating this threshold might not be met, Taiwan's major political parties held a press conference today urging voters to back the amendment.
已经在做这件事情哈，除了我们候选人在竞选的时候之外，我们其实在这个18岁公民权，我们有各式各样的文宣呐。
Taiwan on Thursday announced a minimum wage hike for the new year. Monthly and hourly minimum wages will increase by just under 5%. But is that enough to deal with a dreary global economic outlook? James Chater finds out what young Taiwanese think of the rise.
Rising prices are eating into Taiwanese pay packages, and so Thursday's announcement for next year's minimum wage hike has left many here wanting more.
跟房价还是跟物价比起来，这幅度还是不是很高。
我觉得这调升的影响没有到非常大。我觉得可能说，像台湾的通膨指数越来越高，或许可以先从通膨下手。
In 2023, Taiwan's monthly minimum wage will rise from 25,250 to 26,400 Taiwan dollars, about $800. That's an increase of 4.5%. Taiwan's hourly minimum wage will rise nearly 5%, from 168 to 176 Taiwan dollars, just under $6. Rampant global inflation this year has prompted protests around the world to raise minimum wages. But some fear that could lead to a wage price spiral, a trend where higher income means higher demand for goods and services, higher labour costs for businesses, and therefore higher prices. That's a concern shared by some businesses in Taiwan.
设定大概3%以下，最后也用4.6几65%。政府将来的配套措施，我们建议能够予以放宽相关的规范，让更多实际受困的中小企业不要因为法规太多的限制，而实际上看得到吃不到。
Taiwan's minimum wage has only increased incrementally over recent decades, and with inflation now squeezing the already low pay, there's concern that could drive Taiwan's young labour force away.
除了是一些工程师之外，他们的涨幅，他们觉得都不太满意， 所以他们都会可能去新加坡啊，或者去其他地方工作。
台湾的人才一直在外流，往外面跑。像我们大学生现在要找工作，可能真的都是会找一些，可能都会已经渐渐不会把目光放在台湾本岛里面，可能真的会看外面。可能提高基本工资只是一个治标不治本的方法吧，这样子。
The international economic outlook is bleak, and with that backdrop, the scale of the minimum wage hike in Taiwan has proved divisive. But with little room for economic optimism, in this debate between Taiwan's workers and bosses, it appears no one is really a winner. Alex Chen and James Chaser for TaiwanPlus in Taipei.
The first batch of 560 monkeypox vaccine doses has arrived in Taiwan. The shipment will still have to go through standard testing procedures, which authorities say could take more than a week. The vaccines came from Denmark's Bavarian Nordic, which is the only biotech company in the world that produces monkeypox vaccine. Given its scarcity, Taiwan's government is prioritizing laboratory workers and those who are exposed to the virus, such as medical personnel and close contacts of monkeypox patients. Taiwan has recorded 3 confirmed cases of the disease since June. A court in Taipei has dismissed a request for special pardons from 14 death row inmates. They argued that they were suffering from mental illnesses or disabilities and pleaded for Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen to grant them special pardons. The Taipei High Administrative Court said the request should have been directed to President Tsai herself rather than the court, which does not have the right to grant special pardons. The ruling can be appealed. Taiwan has a total of 38 inmates on death row. Only 2 prisoners have been executed since Tsai took office in 2016. Police have busted a human trafficking ring thought to have targeted Taiwanese people with disabilities. But as John Van Trieste reports, the whereabouts of the group's leader and at least some of the victims are still unknown.
Police say this man and another they've arrested are responsible for the disappearance of up to 30 people. The arrests are the latest in a crackdown on human traffickers. Trafficking rings have lured hundreds of Taiwanese to Cambodia with a promise of high-paying jobs. But on arrival, these Taiwanese people are held captive, forced to work, and sometimes sold or ransomed. These traffickers tend to target vulnerable people to begin with, but the group these 2 men allegedly belong to targeted the most vulnerable of all.
那该集团非常的恶劣，竟将年轻身心障碍的弱势团体拐骗出国至柬埔寨。
Among the people with disabilities the group conned was a woman from Hualien who went to Cambodia in July and hasn't been heard from since. Police say the trafficking was organized, with each member playing a specific role.
他们国内的分工就是代办护照，然后集中处所，几天的时间要住在一个地方。 搭机再出境，那搭机出境也有人专人带他们搭机出境。
Police have busted the ring's headquarters, but the group's leader is still at large and is known to be in Cambodia. Police now have to figure out how to find him and bring the group's missing victims back. Patrick Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Police say they are on the trail of a suspect wanted for the killing of 2 men in the northern Taiwan city of Taoyuan. The 2 men, aged in their 20s, were shot dead Thursday evening. Police say the suspect was captured on CCTV entering and exiting the building where the 2 men were found. Authorities are still working to establish a motive behind the killings. Coming up, a backstage look at Beijing Opera. We get a sneak peek behind the scenes of a new production that's about to hit the stage in Taipei.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please make sure to download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. 2 more Chinese cities have shut down due to a recent rise in COVID-19 cases. The southwestern city of Chengdu, home to over 20 million people, has issued a stay-at-home order with only 1 person per household allowed out every day to buy essentials. Residents rushed to buy supplies before the order took effect Thursday evening. And in the southeastern tech hub of Shenzhen, many businesses are also closed after a semi-lockdown was imposed on Wednesday. Taiwanese electronics giant Foxconn says its China factories are still running normally, but other Taiwanese businesses with plants in China say they face production cuts, supply shortages and logistical bottlenecks as workers are forced to stay home.
只要是有厂的，它就会影响。第一个，你的生产产线，你可能1天2班或3班的，你就必须得停止。
Countries around the world are condemning China's actions in the Xinjiang region following the release of a United Nations report. The findings released on Thursday outline the treatment of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities, giving evidence of abuse and torture. Beijing has denied the accusations and called the report invalid. Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick has the details.
Serious human rights violations and possible crimes against humanity. That was the verdict of a long-awaited United Nations report on China's crackdown in its Xinjiang region. In Beijing, the UN findings released on September 1st were met with denial.
你提到的这份所谓的评估报告，是美国及一些西方势力一手策划制造的，完全非法无效。
But outside of China, the watershed assessment by the Human Rights Commission saw a cascade of calls from governments and other groups to cease rights violations in the far western region.
The United States welcomes this report, this important report, which describes authoritatively the abhorrent human rights treatment of the Uyghur and other minority communities by the People's Republic of China government.
The UN report found evidence of large-scale arbitrary detention. It included documentation, torture, rape, solitary confinement, and other grave abuses committed against Uyghurs and Turkic Muslim minorities in Xinjiang.
The report deepens our grave concern regarding the ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity that China is perpetrating. We will continue to work closely with partners and the international community to hold China accountable. And we will call on China to immediately cease committing these atrocities.
The United Nations itself is standing by the report's findings and its recommendations that China releases Uyghurs unjustly detained. They are also calling on Beijing to bring their campaign in Xinjiang in line with international law.
The Secretary General has read the assessment that clearly identifies serious human rights violations in the Xinjiang region of China. The assessment done by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights also confirms what the Secretary General has been saying on Xinjiang for quite some time, that human rights must be respected and that the Uyghur community needs to be respected and made feel it belongs to the country as a whole without discrimination.
Taiwan's Foreign Minister Joseph Wu tweeted that China's behavior constitutes crimes against humanity. The concerns over the treatment of China's Uyghur population was also echoed by Japan.
同報告書が公表されたことを評価をいたします。新疆ウイグル自治区に関しては重大な人権侵害が行われているとの報告がこれまでも数多く出されています。我が国は新疆ウイグル自治区等の人権状況について深刻に懸念しており、国際社会における普遍的価値である自由、基本的人権の尊重、法の支配が中国においても保障されることが重要であると考えています。
After years of repression in Xinjiang and months waiting for this landmark report, the reality of what is happening in China is becoming impossible to turn away from. But the question for many is, what will the international community be willing to do to bring it to an end? Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick for TaiwanPlus.
Friday marks the 62nd Tibetan Democracy Day. In 1959, thousands of Tibetan refugees fled their homes after an uprising against rule from Beijing was crushed by Chinese troops. Tibetans established a democratic system in exile, with elections first held on September 2, 1960. Supporters of Tibet in Taiwan gathered to celebrate the day at the legislature in Taipei. Among them was Taiwanese legislator Freddie Lim, who heads the parliamentary group for Tibet.
我们应该要跟更多的藏人朋友交朋友，要跟更多的藏人朋友、更多藏人的社团、更多藏人的组织有更多的来往。我相信台湾跟西藏，尤其现在有一个民主机制的在建立以后，我觉得更是拥有共同价值的一个两个非常友好的一个社会，所以期待往这个方向我们继续迈进。
Taiwanese contract manufacturing giant Foxconn is set to take on Tesla as it enters the market for electric vehicles. Foxconn, best known for producing Apple's iPhones, has teamed up with Taiwanese automaker Yulon Motor on the Model C, with pre-orders opening on Thursday. It is one of 3 electric vehicle platforms that the companies are working on together.
其实现在不论是在中国大陆，不论是在美国很多个领域的这些资源，我认为都有机会为这个接下来裕隆的不论是自有品牌或者是新创品牌的布局，能够带来一些很实质而且显著的效益。
Police spend most of their time trying to catch criminals, but their suspects aren't always human. Officers in the southern city of Kaohsiung responded to a 4 a.m. call from a motorist who said that something was blocking the road, only to find the culprits were 4 geese on a midnight stroll. They called for backup from the fire department, which drove the geese to the police station in a fire truck. Worried the geese would escape and cause more mischief, the cops locked the animals in a holding cell with water and some boxes. The geese have now been released from custody. The city's Animal Control Bureau says it's searching for the bird's owner. Singing, acting, recitation and acrobatics. These are just some of the elements you'll find in Beijing opera. But what goes on backstage in the run-up to a show? Our reporter Eugene Huang got a sneak peek behind the scenes of a new production going up this Saturday in Taipei.
With just a few minutes before the rehearsal begins, the cast and crew of Contemporary Legend Theatre are getting ready backstage. Costumes and props are laid out in order, and soon the hallway fills with actors getting into costume and practicing martial arts. Before they get into costume, the actors take to the stage to run through the blocking. Every part of the performance needs rehearsal, even the curtain call.
As you can see behind me, it takes a whole team of people to put on a great show. There are different people taking care of the props, the costumes, and even the person that helps the actors put on their headdresses. And you might think there's also a team of makeup artists, but the actors do their own makeup. They say it's a process that helps them get into character.
因为化妆其实是很安静的一件事情。 然后你边化妆的时候，你就已经开始在进行角色的一个准备，要让心静下来。
Take this actor as an example, Yang Ruiyu, who is one of the only men in Taiwan trained to play Wudan, or female warrior. It takes 2 hours just to put on his makeup. He says it's taboo to speak when you're putting on the base paint, something he learned as a child in theater school. Red blush gives a glowing energy. Thin black lines make the eyes more expressive. After years of going through the process, he's very familiar with the steps, and with Hu Sanyang, the character he's portraying on stage.
我现在就是每一次都会看到不一样的扈三娘，然后再从这里面呢去琢磨我的表演。 期待我能给扈三娘更多不一样的面貌。
With the final touches, the transformation is nearly complete. Yang is ready to don the costume of the proud heroine and head into battle on stage. Yang is just one of the people getting ready for the show. There are dozens of others rushing around backstage, making the final preparations. It's hard to count the amount of time that's gone into this production. Countless hours of rehearsal, years of training for each actor, and centuries of tradition passed down through the ages, all leading up to this one moment, under the spotlights, before a live audience. Kamashi, Andrew Ryan, and Eugene Huang for TaiwanPlus.
Wonderful. If you'd like to see the production featured in this report, Contemporary Legend Theatre is putting up a series of Beijing opera pieces this weekend at the Taiwan Traditional Theatre Centre in Taipei. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally, we leave you with images of the International Saudi Falcon and Hunting Exhibition in Saudi Arabia. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.